Hi there, happy Friday. TGIF, am I right? It's the end of March. I'm happy to have you here. Thanks to everybody who joined us at last night's Stand Up Happy Hour Hangout, which we've been doing for over 6 years. Every Thursday at 8 p.m. East, we had a great time. We were there for like 3.5 hours. I did not want to leave. There were still 25 people there, I think, when we left, but we had over 60 people together, and it was awesome last night. Thank you very much to all who joined us. Today I will be live at 3 p.m. East with Mara Quint or thereabouts. Give or take a few minutes. You can watch us on Substack or YouTube or Twitter or Facebook or Instagram usually. I'm on all of those places now at either Pete Dominic or Stand Up with Pete. And also want to just tell you right now, if you want to jump to my conversation today, I have one of our favorites. It's Tim Wise joining me. An awesome conversation with Tim. We talked about a wide range of issues. Tim is great, as always. I think you're going to love it. It starts at 30 minutes in today. But even though it's Friday, and I'm often late on Friday, if you don't take note of that, because of the hangout, I stay up late with a lot of people, and then I get up a little later in the morning than I normally do. That's why the show's up a little bit later. Either way, I've got your latest news and clips when I do get the show posted. Don't forget, it's Podjam, April 9th through 12th. Wajid Ali's going to be there. JL Kovan's going to be there. He's at our hangout last night, as a matter of fact. And Rod and Karen from The Black Guy Who Tips will be there as well. I hope you will be joining us. There's a link to buy tickets at the top of every day's show notes between now and then. Podjam 3, Las Vegas. Can't wait to see you April 9th through 12th. It's going to be a really fun weekend. And thank you for supporting my podcast. This is a daily podcast. Can't do it without you. It's patreon.com/Pete Dominic, or you can get a paid subscription on Substack, or both, whatever you want to do. Either way, very happy to have your support. And if you haven't signed up, please do now. Let's get to the headlines and the clips. First, I've got the war report that I've been producing every day. It's day 27, I believe, and the Ayatollah said that we're now going to hold off targeting Iranian energy sites for another 10 days. Talks, are ongoing. We'll give them a little bit more time with the Iranians. The pause has been set to expire today, so gave him an extension. Did he cave? You tell me. Also, the Ayatollah complainee insisted that it's up to Iranian leaders to convince him to halt the war, saying he doesn't care about making a deal. Iranian state media has said the regime has complete doubt about Washington's willingness to negotiate. Also learned that the commander of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, a key figure behind the total blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, was killed yesterday by the Israelis. Asian markets fell after U.S. markets' biggest drop since the start of the war. Israel and Iran exchanged fire today after useless S. Grant's deadline for Iran to fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz moved, and claimed there was progress in talks to end the war. The war's toll on fuel prices has set off protests in the Philippines, where hundreds of transport workers in the country went on strike for a second straight day today to protest a surge in fuel prices, days after the country's president declared a national energy emergency stemming from the war in the Middle East. And they're not alone. Several other countries have either done it or considered doing it. Iran's foreign minister told the UN Human Rights Council today that the strike on an elementary school on February 28th in southern Iran that killed dozens of children was not a mistake, but a calculated assault. He said they are targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure with no regard for the laws of war and basic principles of humanity and civility. Marco Rubio is with leaders at the G7 meeting in France today. He's expected to press European and Asian allies to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The agenda says these G7 leaders, it's the equivalents in all these other countries of our State Department, our Secretary of State, their foreign ministers. The agenda says they're going to discuss efforts to stop the war, end Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile development, and reopen maritime trade routes. Kuwait's Public Works Ministry said that a port there was attacked by drones and missiles today. Initial reports said there was material damage, but no injuries. The Israeli military said today that it had struck targets across Tehran and western Iran overnight, including sites involved in the production of ballistic missiles. It also said it had struck Iran's primary facility for the production of missiles and sea mines. Oil prices continued to climb despite Jabba the Pizza Hut's delay to threat to bomb Iran even more. Oil prices rose. The global stock markets mostly dipped lower, but oil jumped to its highest level this week and the S&P 500 had its biggest daily decline since January. There's a lot more to report, but that's what I've got for today's war report. Other huge headlines from yesterday. The Senate voted overnight to fund much of the Department of Homeland Security after a 42-day standoff over immigration enforcement tactics. The measure does not include additional funding for immigration and customs enforcement or Border Patrol. And it does not include any of the demands Democrats made to limit the tactics of federal immigration officers. The legislation now goes to the House for a vote. The DHS funding lapse forced tens of thousands of employees to work without pay or quit, and resulted in long lines at some airports amid peak spring break travel. So is that good news? For weeks, Democrats refused to support funding for DHS after federal officers killed 2 U.S. citizens in Minneapolis. Well, there you go. That's the news. Hopefully that will have some effect on the lines, or a great effect back on security lines at airports across the country, including those of you traveling out to Vegas for Podjam. And all right, now a federal judge temporarily blocked the Pentagon from designating Anthropic, the AI giant, as a supply chain risk to national security, ruling the Trump administration unlawfully tried to punish the AI company for publicly criticizing the government's position on AI. This is a huge ruling. The record supports an inference that Anthropic is being punished for criticizing the government's contracting position in the press, said the U.S. District Judge in her order. Punishing Anthropic for bringing public scrutiny to the government's contracting position is classic illegal First Amendment retaliation. The judge's order, which follows court proceedings earlier this week, is set to take effect in 7 days, allowing the administration to pursue an appeal. And will they? We will see. Oh, and this fat, sloppy old sack of shit is adding his name to U.S. dollar bills. Really? First time a sitting president's signature will go on paper currency, according to the Treasury Department. Burger Gene King's going to put his signature on the bills in honor of the country's 250th anniversary, according to the Treasury. Historically, paper currency carries the signatures of the Treasury Secretary and the Treasurer. But now we got to look at his name on the money, if anybody even carries money around, if they look at it. At least it's not his face. His signature on the dollar bill is not the only representation of him that Americans can expect to see on U.S. currency this year, by the way. A federal commission of people that he appointed recently approved a design that would include his image on a 24-karat commemorative gold coin. Also, of course, in honor of the country's 250th anniversary. That coin's design still requires official approval from the Treasury, but like for the country's 250th anniversary, the picture, at least on one side of it, is him, his face, not something that we collectively should be celebrating. Or like, why one person? I think you know why. And how about this? Forbes is out with a new estimate as to his unbelievable wealth, including that of which he's gained in just this last year in office. Forbes says the answer is $6.5 billion, according to the recent tally updated in March. He added $1.4 billion over just the past year alone. He's leveraged the presidency for profit, of course, they say. His cryptocurrency ventures stalled out before the election, exploded after he won, adding an estimated $1.8 billion to his fortune overall. Another $500 million came in court, where his legal team succeeded in eliminating a $500 million judgment against him. His once dormant licensing business surged $400 million as foreign developers clamored to do business with him. And why isn't he up even more? Well, the value of his shares in Trump Media and Technology Group, the parent company of Truth Social, actually decreased $1.3 billion last year, because that venture apparently is bleeding money, according to Forbes. Still, most of his second year just remaining. Don't be surprised if there's billions of dollars more headed his way. I remember when Republicans and people in general, one of their main complaints about politicians is that they get rich while they're in office. And but not, I guess we don't mind him getting rich while he's in office, right? It's okay if it's him. Transgender athletes have been barred from women's Olympic events, according to the IOC. Catholic churches are seeing a new surge of converts, according to the New York Times data. Well, that's interesting. The average rate on a 30-year mortgage in the U.S. hit 6.38%, the fourth increase since the war began. In Cuba, doctors are telling reporters that the U.S. oil blockade is killing their patients. New census information driven by lower immigration rates. The population growth has either slowed or declined in about 75% of U.S. counties. Wow. Yesterday, our dear leader, madman in charge, apparently discussed converting a historic White House room into a guest bedroom with a bath, which is shocking. And a truck carrying 40,000 pounds of tofu careened into a ditch off the interstate and sat there for weeks. This is in Missouri. And a local fire department chief said, the smell will hit you like a brick wall. Well, but there's a lot of protein in there, so get after it if you're in Missouri driving by. Sounds awful. All right, those are the headlines that I've gathered for you for today's episode of Stand Up. Now let's get to all of the sound bites, many of which are pertaining and promoting and creating context around this weekend's No Kings protest. I'll be emceeing the event right here in Nyack, New York, if you want to come. Also helping produce the event, which has been a lot of fun to work with my local activist friends here in Rockland County, New York. Let's get to those clips now, though. First, I thought this was interesting. This is from a New York Times podcast hosted by a columnist named David French. And he had Stanley McChrystal, former retired general. Of course, everybody knows who Stanley McChrystal is. I met him and interviewed him at the Aspen Ideas Festival several years ago. I liked the guy, much to my surprise. But anyway, I thought this was very interesting because he was asked by David French about all the bravado and the bullshit that he sees from Pete Hegseth and the like.
You have been described as one of the finest leaders of men in combat in the modern American military. And what we are seeing right now in the current Secretary of Defense is an enormous amount of bravado. Sort of a, we are lethal. We will kill you. We will destroy you. You've got the bench pressing and the push-ups and all of the everything. And I get a lot of questions. How does this land with soldiers? And my perspective of it has been, well, with some soldiers it lands, they really like it. They like it when a senior leader will get their hands dirty. They like it when a senior leader is fit and that they can share, like they can do the same things that the guys on the line do. But at the same time, in my experience, bravado is not necessarily really appreciated. It's more of a show, don't tell culture in the military. You've led men in combat for much of your life. Talk to me a bit about sort of that line between sort of bravado and cool, calm professionalism. Yeah. How do you see all of that?
I'm disappointed by the current atmosphere that is communicated from the top. I had the honor and opportunity to serve with some of the most elite forces, people who really did some extraordinary things, but they didn't beat their chest about it.
Right.
And they weren't braggadocious, and they didn't talk about, yeah, we love killing people. That's just not the way they behaved. Now, the danger, though, of some of that verbiage now is much of the force is 18 years old.
Right.
And it's influenceable. And they see that and they go, wow, that's the way we ought to think. That's the way we ought to be. We are superior. And there's another reality that particularly in today's military, the number of people who really need to have big biceps and be able to kick open the door is minuscule.
Right.
Because most of the force is intelligence, communications, logistics, all the enablers that allow you to, with great accuracy, put that very small number of operators. So when you say all people should look like me, that would be a disaster. Mm-hmm. I think people ought to look like whatever they look like so that they are capable in their jobs. I think, the idea that we wouldn't want gay or transgender service members to serve if they're good is preposterous. I want who's ever good to serve. And you also get different perspectives. And what we found in the counterterrorist force, when I was young, it was sort of homogenous. It was sort of white males with, good posture. And by the time you got to Iraq 2007, as we had matured, it had become a meritocracy of older men and women, young people, all this different because they had proven they were contributory to the fight. So your ticket to being accepted was no longer just your bench press. It was now, are you smart? Are you committed? Will you be a good colleague? And that became a much healthier force. If we would think that way, I think it's a healthier way for military service to be. And I even have a problem with the word warrior. And it's not because you can't say, well, the warrior ethos is bad, but traditionally warriors were separate from soldiers. And the difference between an army and a mob is discipline and leadership and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It's why we operate in a certain controlled way. Because when you give young people the ability to carry weapons that can take life, you have to have a level of discipline, part of which is values and culture, and part of it is just military prescribed discipline. It's essential.
Yeah. I like that. I like that a lot. I thought that was the context and nuance that I wanted to hear from a military leader, and McChrystal's a great communicator. So there you go. All right. Speaking of great communicators, here's a clip from Congressman Daniel Goldman, who's a Democrat, scolding his Republican colleagues for their hypocrisy. So always worth sharing.
It is a joke that you're trying to say, oh, that Republicans were treated so terribly under Biden and Democrats were treated so well. George Santos got a pardon. Every single Republican that was under investigation had their investigation dropped or dismissed. Every single person with any political background that Donald Trump has investigated or prosecuted is a Democrat. So you can try to make an excuse, oh, well, Senator Bob Menendez was so egregious. It doesn't, I mean, George Santos' crimes are pretty darn egregious too. You're not complaining about the pardon that went to him.
Yes, the hypocrisy is just, it really is suffocating every day to watch the hypocrisy. Say one thing, do another, do one thing, say the other. It's constant. Speaking of which, here's a little bit more. Add to it, a reporter caught up with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez outside the Capitol yesterday. I think this is from the Midas Touch team reporter.
What do you make of your Republican colleagues who have said for months that ICE agents can only be safe if they wear masks, and now they show up to airports without any masks on?
Yeah, I mean, they were always full of it then, they're full of it now.
They were always full of it, and they're full of it now. Right. More evidence of the hypocrisy. All right. Well, now let's get to those clips that I've got for you that are pertaining to this week's No Kings protests movements. First, this is the frontman from the Dropkick Murphys, the Irish-American Celtic. That's how it's pronounced? Am I supposed to say Celtic or is it Celtic? Punk band from Massachusetts. Here is the lead, the frontman, I guess, Ken Casey. He was on Boston's WGBH, I think it is, talking about why they are so supportive of this movement and these No Kings protests.
I just want to be a part of anything that offers resistance to what's happening now. And as far as the band goes, our legacy has been being about this, as you introduced us, anti-fascist, pro-worker, since our inception in 1996. So if that's who you've been, why in 2026 with what's going on now would you ever be silent? So, and I understand there's a lot of people who listen to Dropkick Murphys who maybe they weren't around in 96, maybe they don't do a deep dive into what we're about, and they might just listen to Shipping Up to Boston and then be offended that we talked about their cult leader and they want to leave, and that's their prerogative. But we're who we are for 30 years, and we'll keep doing it. And I think in some ways we're the perfect antagonist to the MAGA movement. We don't like bullies. We have issues with authority ourselves, and if someone tells us not to do something, we're probably going to do it twice as loud as if you didn't say anything. So here we are. We did the first No Kings in April of last year, and then we were on tour for the second one. And we just, like I said, if there's resistance to be offered, we want to take part in it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for every artist and performer who takes part in it. That's awesome. We're going to have the Chapin sisters at our protest this weekend. Very much looking forward to seeing them. All right, let's play this clip from Rachel Maddow on Monday. I am critical of her performance sometimes and some of her analysis, but there's plenty of great stuff that team produces and has for years. I think they've done a great job at documenting the protest movement since Donnie D. Cups was reelected by our friends and neighbors. And she does a good job offering some context and some evidence around No Kings. And so here's that, Rachel Maddow on MS Now this Monday.
This weekend, this Saturday, Liam's hometown of Minneapolis will be the flagship protest in what is expected potentially to be the largest single day of protest in American history. June of last year, that was the first No Kings protest. That drew an astonishing 5 million people across the country. You might remember that was June 14th, the first No Kings Day. That was the day Trump tried to throw himself a weird North Korea-style military parade for his own birthday. That sad, low turnout event was wildly overshadowed by 5 million Americans turning out at protests against Trump all over the country. And then there was the second No Kings Day in October. That one did not draw 5 million people. That one drew 7 million people. The flagship protest in October was in Philadelphia, the birthplace of the Constitution. 7 million people turned out on No Kings Day in October. And that was before Trump bulldozed the East Wing of the White House, and before he tried to arrest 6 Democratic members of Congress. And before we learned that in addition to bombing random boats in the Caribbean, he was also deliberately killing the survivors of those bombings, which is a war crime. It was before he invaded Venezuela and announced he was taking their oil. It was before he started an apocalyptic war with Iran. It was before he renamed the Kennedy Center for himself and then announced that he would close it. It's before he blew up health insurance for millions of American families. It's before he effectively made the Nobel Peace Prize winner give him her prize. It's before he sent the FBI to seize the ballots from Atlanta, Georgia. It's before he posted a video online depicting President Obama and his wife Michelle Obama as if they were apes. It's before they killed Renee Nicole Good. It's before they killed Alex Preddy. It's before they took Liam. This Saturday it will be Minneapolis as the flagship, but there are more than 3,000 separate protests planned all over the country this Saturday. No Kings.
Well done, Rachel Maddow. Well done. I like it. And now let's listen to one of the co-founders of the No Kings organization and movement. It's Ezra Levin. He was talking to the Bulwark's Tim Miller yesterday.
But the question they asked me was like, okay, I'm going because I feel like I want to do something, but I don't really know if this is doing anything. And is there something else I can do after? Because I'm just so mad, and and it's nice to feel good and to be around people in the community, and that's a good start. That's not nothing, but I want to do more. What do you tell people that ask you that question?
Look, I think people should be hard on our tactics. Absolutely. The way I think about No Kings is that it is a tactic among many tactics that feeds into an overall strategy, and that strategy is organized, nonviolent, massive people power. And that strategy is designed to achieve a goal, which is preventing the fascists from consolidating power permanently. If the only thing you're ever doing is showing up on a Saturday protest, regardless of how historic and size it is, you're not going to save democracy. I mean, that's pretty clear to all of us. So what can a one-day protest like this do? One, sends a very clear message that the guy who wants to appear all-powerful, which is why he's launching wars and trying to crush American cities with a Gestapo force, that the message it sends is he isn't all-powerful. He's actually a weak, lame duck, authoritarian president who's on the way out. And democracy is reasserting itself, and the way we know that is that there are 3,100 events in every nook and cranny of the country. Sending a message is nice, but it's not the only goal. That's a one-day messaging victory. The reason why we're not storming into New York or San Francisco or Chicago and D.C., just the big city centers, and only doing it there, is because of the second big thing that we can accomplish is recruiting people all over the country to be part of more meaningful, deep organizing on the ground. Because you see it, I see it, this guy is planning to sabotage the midterm elections. that is where we're headed this year. And if you're going to push back effectively against an authoritarian that's going to do that, a one-day protest can pull people in, but then what you need to do is something akin to what we saw in the Twin Cities or in Chicago or in LA, a level of depth of your organizing that goes beyond a Saturday and actually forces some economic pain onto a society that might otherwise just accept an authoritarian subverting our elections come November.
There you go. Ezra Levin from Indivisible on the Bulwark. And if you needed more, here's the great Heather Cox Richardson. I know many of you are subscribers to her work, and so I thought this was good too.
Somebody asked me if it was worthwhile to turn out to the No Kings rally this Saturday. That, some people say turning out to rallies doesn't matter. That's absolutely wrong. Turning out to rallies to show your physical support for something is huge. Not only does it make other people recognize that they're part of something bigger and give them courage to do more, but also it demonstrates not only to the people in power, but also to people who want to be in power. Remember, we have an election coming up, that if they want your support, they need to support the measures that you care about. So one of the measures that people use is that if 3.5% of a population turns out at rallies, you're looking at regime change. And there's it's just kind of a rule that people use. That's a good idea. It's a good way to think about it. But it also, instead of aiming for that perfect number, it's worth pointing out that these demonstrations that show that the administration does not have the support of the American people challenge its very legitimacy, because as you remember, our Constitution begins, "We the people," and goes on to say that we the people loan to our elected officials our power. But if they are acting in ways that we don't approve of, that we cease to support, we can take that power back. And that's really, really important to demonstrate. And if you don't think it's important, think about what happened after the last No Kings rally, which happened on a Saturday. The next Monday, Trump began knocking down the East Wing of the White House. He was that upset about the No Kings rally. And you've asked me, do I think he's going to do something like that again now? I'm afraid the answer to that is yes. I think if we demonstrate our disapproval, he's going to lash out in some way. But that does not mean we shouldn't do it. It still is our country, and we have the right and perhaps the duty to make it clear that this is not the government, or the government is not behaving in ways that we think are acceptable.
There you go. Heather Cox Richardson with a great explanation. And if you aren't motivated by all that, then I don't know what to tell you. But good stuff. Hope to see you at the No Kings rally this weekend. At yours, there's going to be thousands of them all over the country. And I look forward to hearing from you and your pictures, your experience, and all the rest. So send them my way. StandUpWithPete@gmail.com. Finally, let's get some comedy in here. Jimmy Kimmel was live last night. He was joking about how Mike Johnson, Republicans in the House, gave him yet another award or trophy.
The statue they gave him, the statue itself, the inaugural America First Award, in recognition of our president's extraordinary need to win things every single day, is a golden eagle. And that is going on the mantle right next to his re-gifted Nobel Peace Prize and the Olympic gold medal he didn't win and the 3 tournament championships he won at his own golf club. Are we sure he's building a ballroom with that money and not a $900 million trophy case? Trump loves trophies. I mean, he even married one. He really loves trophies. And then Cecil B. Dementia got up and gave an hour-long acceptance speech, during which he covered a wide range of subjects, including how bigly he's winning the war in Iran that isn't actually a war at all.
They want to deflect from all of the tremendous success that we're having in this military operation. I won't use the word war because they say if you use the word war, that's maybe not a good thing to do. They don't like the word war because you're supposed to get approval. So I'll use the word military operation.
That's right. That's right. It's not World War III he's getting us into. It's World Military Operation 3. At least he's upfront about the fact that he just brazenly disregarded the authority of all the people in that room. Oh, you need permission from Congress to start a war? I'll just call it a picnic then. And they'll give me an award for it. Not only did Trump get an award from Congress, he got a present from Iran. On Tuesday, he was bragging about this mysterious secret prize he got from the Iranians. He said he couldn't tell us what it was. And then, of course, during his cabinet meeting today, he couldn't hold it in anymore and told us what it was.
You know, I told you about a present, right? Steve, can I reveal the present?
You can do anything you want, sir.
They said to show you the fact that we're real and solid and we're there. We're going to let you have 8 boats of oil. 8 boats. 8 big boats of oil.
Let me get this straight. The country we are at war with, the country we are currently bombing, sent you a gift? And that gift is 8 big boats of oil? It's a Hanukkah miracle. Except from a country that hates Hanukkah and the people who celebrate it. 8 boats of oil is a gift you'd send Diddy, not the President of the United States.
Yeah, there you go. Kimmel last night. Very funny, as always. Okay, now it's time to get to my guest today. It's always great when I get the opportunity to talk to Tim Wise, Senior Fellow at the African American Policy Institute now. He's a speaker, he's a writer, an author. You should follow him on Medium, support him on Patreon, get all of his books. He is posting regularly still on Twitter and Blue Sky if you want to see where he's doing daily stuff, daily thoughts. And we were live yesterday on YouTube and Substack. If you want to go watch it while you're there, subscribe and like it and all those things. Let's do it right now with Tim Wise. Always great. Yes, look who I've got on a Thursday evening. One of my favorite people to read, to listen to watch, and of course to talk to. My friend Tim Wise joining me. Great to see you. Thanks for joining me.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
How are things at the African American Policy Forum? You're very busy there.
Well, you know, of course, yeah. We're just trying to hold it down along with all the other folks trying to maintain what semblance of civil rights infrastructure is still left to defend. I wish I was saying that tongue in cheek, but as you know, a sledgehammer is being taken to the last 60, 70 years of progress in that regard, both, you know, in terms of civil rights laws, obviously DEI programs and efforts all around the country, public and private sector, the attack on Black history and truthful history in our schools and our museums. So there are a lot of fronts that we are fighting on as well as others. You know, our primary concern right now is just making sure that racial justice does not fall out of the frame in progressive activism and organizing. One of the things that, you know, we're concerned about, and we've got this No Kings March, the next one coming up this weekend. Obviously, we're excited about that. We believe in speaking back to this increasingly authoritarian regime. But what we also realize is that too often, even in progressive spaces, this is the part that falls out of the frame. You know, we talk about authoritarianism, we talk about fascism, but a lot of times we forget that the road to authoritarianism, at least in this country, has always been paved with anti-Black racism, that it has been racial resentment and hostility that has been the yeast that has allowed the authoritarian bread to rise, if you will, right? And when we forget that, or when we act like racism is a side issue, or that's identity politics, or we'll get to that, Tim. We know that's an issue, but we got to talk about democracy generally because white people don't want to hear about racism. You may not want to deal with racism, but racism wants to deal with you, right? And even if you are white, you are the reason we're in a democracy crisis is because we never dealt with the authoritarian tendencies of some in this country after the Civil War. We allowed Reconstruction to be overthrown by people who did not believe in democracy, and we've been suffering ever since. So we are just insistent that we're going to keep this in the frame, whether folks like it or not. We're not going to have democracy through some type of ecumenical colorblindness. We're only going to have it when we realize that the assault on Black and brown folks is always the sort of canary in the coal mine for the attack on everybody else. And as long as we keep that in the frame, it's not that that's the only issue. It's not that it's more important than other issues, but it's always there. And sadly, it is the thing that sometimes gets left off. The very first King's March, for example, the early iterations of the signage and some of the handouts and the posters had every possible issue listed on the signage. There were, hands off this, hands off that. It said hands off NATO, but there was nothing hands off DEI or hands off racial justice. Now that later was corrected because we and others, pitched a fit, frankly, and made the point, like, you got to include this. And as soon as it was pointed out, most of the people in that formation were like, oh, yeah, it's not like they were hostile. It's just they hadn't really noticed it or thought about it. And that's the problem. So that's what we're up to at AAPF, as we always are, just trying to keep folks honest, including people on our team who sometimes forget that this thing called racism is not just one issue among many, right? But it is sort of it's the roux in the gumbo of American fascism, right? It's the thing without which the fascism is not fascism.
No doubt about it. Without which the Christian nationalism is not Christian nationalist as well, which is something I wanted to talk with you about. Before that, I got to ask you about your thoughts on this SAVE Act moving through, stuck in the Senate. It was voted out of the House by Republicans. It was a couple of Congresses before, I believe, as well, something similar. It's stuck in the Senate. It's probably not going to pass out of the Senate. But I think it's important that we remember history when it comes to voter ID. There's so much more that it will disenfranchise. So many more people would be disenfranchised by the SAVE Act, including all kinds of women and folks living in rural areas that might not have their birth certificate. Lisa Murkowski, the senator of Alaska, had a pretty interesting presentation about how difficult it would be for so many people in Alaska to simply vote. Disenfranchisement is as American as apple pie. The SAVE Act is something that Donald Trump desperately wants passed because it's the only way he thinks he can effectively cheat and steal the election by disenfranchising people that would otherwise vote against him. He also, by the way, just said he thinks mail-in voting should be illegal, and then he mailed in his vote. And then his guy lost, and now he's represented by a Democrat in Mar-a-Lago. Anyway, the SAFE Act has to do with immigration, has to do with a made-up crime that undocumented people are voting, which is the dumbest thing in the world. But, of course, it has a long history in America. Where do you want to start with remembering that?
Well, let's start with this. Let's start with that mythology, right? This sort of notion of people voting illegally. I'm not going to say that it never happens, but I am going to say this: to think that it happens with any regularity among large numbers is silly, and it's silly for one obvious reason: the payoff for committing voter fraud is just incredibly low for the risk that you're taking, right? So at least if you're going to commit some kind of financial fraud, right? If you're going to try to game the system through some kind of financial fraud, even the one that the right wing likes to talk about, the child care fraud in Minnesota, most of which has been overhyped, obviously, right, even though some of it exists. At least there's a financial motive. You can sort of understand why someone might try to game the system when there's money at play. What do you get by going and voting when you're not supposed to? What are the odds, after all, that your vote is going to be the one that made the difference? It's not likely. So for you, the payoff is what? Just the satisfaction, the warm feeling of getting to vote for your person, knowing that if you get caught, by the way, the punishment is definitely possibly jail time, a significant fine. And if you are, in fact, an undocumented person, you will absolutely be deported for having committed that crime. So why in the world would anybody do it? The only folks that tend to do it are people who do it by accident because they didn't know that they couldn't vote. They were enrolled. They were put on the rolls, errantly. They didn't know, and then they accidentally voted. Or they were people who thought they had been re-enfranchised, perhaps after they had had a criminal conviction, and they thought they were okay to vote. Or they have been MAGA folks who went to vote for their mom who just died, who just wanted to vote for Donald Trump. But that's happened like a couple of times, I think, in the villages, which is like God's waiting room. God is clearly tired of waiting on some of these people. And they go and vote because they want the warm fuzzy of voting for Donald Trump. But this idea that there's busloads of quote unquote illegal people voting is just nonsense. It doesn't make any sense at all. So that's number one. Number two, what the real motivation is when you listen to the other things that the defenders of the SAVE Act say at the extremes. These are the same people who always have wanted to make it more difficult to vote. So it isn't just that they want people to have ID, which in and of itself is not a problem. But it used to be they just wanted you to have a driver's license, right? And now a driver's license isn't enough. No, now you have to have the passport, which half of all Americans don't have. or you have to have a birth certificate. I don't know where my birth certificate is.
Me neither.
I mean, I don't have no idea. Now, I know where I could go to get one, but it's a pain in the ass.
Right.
It's a pain in the ass to do it. I'm sure I could do it, but you know how many people, given the pain in the ass of doing it, probably just wouldn't get around to it? Right. A lot of people. And these are not people who are not legitimate voters. These are people who are absolutely legitimate voters, including a lot of Republicans, by the way. And I'm one of those strange people who, even though I know that it might mean my preferred candidate would lose, I want everybody who's able to vote to vote. I really believe that's how democracy works. I know that not all those 90 million non-voters are progressive. There are some people, friends of mine on the left, who think if we can just get those 90 million to vote, our side will win all the time. That's nonsense. The research actually says the non-voters are split evenly, just like the voters are. We have no idea how those folks are going to vote. Sometimes they're going to vote for progressive folks. Sometimes they're going to vote for reactionary.
And now I feel like there's no way to measure, but like somebody might be strongly feeling one thing or another, and then they go watch some YouTube video or TikTok video, and all of a sudden they believe the moon is made of cheese and it's going to crash into you.
You have no way of knowing, but I'm still somebody who would prefer, I would love it if everyone who was eligible to vote would get out and vote, because then we would actually have politicians who had to listen to the voices of the people, who had to get out and actually talk to people and learn about what people care about, and would be probably more representative of the body politic than they are right now. So I want people to vote, but the other side lets you know that they don't. It's not just that they want you to have the hardest type of ID to obtain. It's not just that they want you to have an ID that married women will have a different name than what they use now if it's a birth certificate. It's that they also want to restrict early voting, right? Not just mail-in voting, early voting. What's the problem with early voting? Where is the evidence that having, a 2-week period where you can vote early leads to more fraud? If anything, it just makes things easier for everyone.
Again, it makes things easier. Yeah.
It means less of a clog on election day, right? It actually means probably less people who want or need to vote by mail because, hey, I don't need to send it in by mail. I got to vote 3 weeks ago and it was easy. The line was short. It's probably less fraud because when I've gone to vote early, there's only like 9 people in line. So the poll workers are not, frantic. They're able to really pay attention. Is this the guy who's signing? Is that him? Is this really the right person? So probably early voting is good for fraud detection. Why would you attack early voting? Well, we know the answer. We don't want early voting because early voting is disproportionately used by working class folks who can't necessarily get off work on the day of the election. It's used by people of color disproportionately. It's used by college students disproportionately. It's used by elderly folks disproportionately. And a lot of these constituencies are constituencies that the right doesn't really want to vote in large numbers. So when they say, and then on the far right, these are the same people want this act to pass who pretty openly say they'd like to repeal the 19th Amendment.
Yeah.
I mean, some of them aren't very shy about it. Right. So when you say those kinds of things, you're pretty well tipping your hand as to what it's about. It's not about election integrity. It is about making sure that certain people who you never thought should have the right to vote in the first place will not be able to without incredibly difficult hoops to jump through. And for those who think the hoops aren't difficult or, maybe you'll need to get a new copy of your birth certificate or a passport, but, a passport's only $135, 2 points. Number one, the poll tax was considerably lower than that, and that was found to be unconstitutional by the court. So when people say it's only $135, that is more, considerably more than the poll tax, which the court has already said was unconstitutional. Secondly, right now, do you know how long the passports are taking to get processed? If we're waiting on passports to get processed, there's a very good chance that people, if there's a flood of requests for passports, that those won't even get back to people in time, certainly not for primaries that would be coming up in the late summer or early fall, and maybe not even in time for the general election. So this is ridiculous. This is a solution in search of a problem, and really it is a hammer being used to pound the nail of voter access and civil rights. It is, again, an all-out assault on the infrastructure of civil rights, trying to reverse the gains of the 1960s, the gains, of 1920 in terms of women's right to vote, and even the gains of the 13th 14th and 15th Amendment in terms of the extension of rights to African American folk.
And add that to, and this is what I wanted to ask you as well, just in general, add that to the gutting of the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and by the Supreme Court. And then add that to the rollback of DEI policies and affirmative action at schools and universities consideration, both in the government and in the private sector, rolling back, not to mention K through 12 education. What are you seeing in terms of consequences of all of those policies being rolled back, which of course creates obstacles, limits opportunity, creates costs, and we know, what it's being done for. We've been here before. It's shocking that we're as far down the road to some extent as we are in terms of policy being rolled back. But how is it affecting folks in this country who benefited from those opportunities and from those obstacles being removed through a hard, long fight, we should say?
Well, we know, for instance, that the hardest hit folks in the first year of Trump 2.0 were Black women who lost their jobs at disproportionate rates because they were disproportionately represented in government positions. They had worked very hard, worked their way up within civil service, for example, which, as we talked about on a previous show earlier in the year, some of the most meritocratic jobs you can get were civil service jobs because there's an exam you have to take and then you work your way up in the promotion system. It's very much a meritocratic system, unlike in the private sector where so much is about the old boys network and who you know and getting jobs based on connections. And these are, there have been literally hundreds of thousands overall in both the public and private sector, Black women. I think the number that I saw was 300,000 last time I looked at the number. It might have been 500,000. I can't recall. But somewhere between 300 and 500,000 Black women who were disemployed. And I use that number very, very deliberately. Disemployed. They're not just unemployed. That's a passive language. They have been disemployed as a result of these policies because the attack on civil service, the cuts in government employment of important jobs in the Department of Education, in the Department of Housing and Urban Development, in Veterans Affairs, in the Commerce Department, disproportionately affecting Black women, the cuts in DEI programs in the private sector, many of those jobs that had been created for years to try to help those institutions become more representative and equitable, many of them having significant impacts. Some of them had only been in those positions a few years and were trying to make a difference in those private sector positions, all of a sudden wiped clean as a result of fear that if they continued in that direction, the administration was going to take them to court and sue them because the administration threatened to do that. Right. They were making lists of private employers, particularly large ones, that continued to do DEI. So we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people who have lost their jobs. That affects real people, real families, real communities. You remember in the first Trump administration, he used to brag about how low Black unemployment had fallen. This was before the pandemic, of course, when he stopped talking about unemployment numbers altogether as if he had nothing to do with that, or it had happened under somebody else's administration, or it wasn't relevant. But before the pandemic, he would talk about Black unemployment is the lowest it's ever been. Well, right now, the Black unemployment numbers are as high as they have been in several years, and they are 2.5 to 3 times the rate for what the Census Bureau and Labor Department call non-Hispanic whites. At every single level, you can look at for high school dropouts, persons with high school degrees, with college degrees, the unemployment rates are still 2 to 3 times higher. For Black folks. And it's really telling when you start looking at the college degree level, right? It's one thing to say, a Black person with a high school diploma is twice as likely to be out of work as a white person with a college degree. You might expect that. But even when you're only looking at Black and white folks who both have college degrees, right, who both have similar credentials, even when they majored in the same thing, by the way, and I wrote a piece about this last year, that was published on Medium, they still have, even among engineers, among people in finance, still have unemployment rates that are 2.5, 3 times higher than the rate for similar white folks. So what that tells us is that you have an awful lot of employers who are engaged in some form of pre-compliance, right? This sort of desire to either get on the right side of Trump or at least to avoid trouble. And that's not because they're being sued by the administration. The DOJ hasn't brought a case against them. They're just afraid. And as a result, they are unilaterally disarming their diversity and equity efforts. We're seeing this in colleges. Right. We're seeing colleges change their curriculum, telling professors to change the words on their syllabus, to change the readings on their syllabus, to change the names of their courses. We're seeing diversity and equity offices shuttered. And what's fascinating is that a court recently ruled, this is only like 6 weeks ago, ruled that the Department of Education's a Dear Colleague letter where they threatened colleges and K-12 schools if they continued to do DEI.
They're not letting that go. Like we're not talking about it. We're looking away from it. But the fact of the matter is all these universities are terrified, and the federal, the administration, the federal government, whatever entity or agency it is, they are following up. They are making sure that you don't do or say or teach what they don't want you to, right?
Well, but here's the thing. The court said that they couldn't threaten those schools, that there was nothing unconstitutional about what they were doing, and the administration agreed not to appeal. The administration agreed to drop it. The department,
that's right.
They agreed to drop it, and so they're not appealing it. So right now, those schools could go and reinstitute those programs and policies if they chose to do it, because the administration did not appeal their defeat in court. But the schools are so and this is, and I think I may have said this to you on a previous show. It was never about actually winning in court. I think that Harmeet Dillon and the DOJ Civil Rights Division knew all along that if any of this stuff went to court, they were going to lose. They haven't won any of these DEI cases once they've been appealed. They've lost case after case after case. I was involved in a case that I mentioned on a previous show in Seattle, where this guy who was connected to Chris Rufo, the big anti-CRT guy, he brought a case against the Seattle Race and Social Justice Initiative, claiming that he had been the victim as a white man of critical race theory and wokeness and all this. And I was an expert witness in the case, and he lost. The case was tossed on summary judgment by the judge. Now he's still appealing it. We'll see what happens, but they've lost every single time. And yet, with the exception of Seattle, to their credit, a lot of these institutions have just caved anyway. They've just decided, you know what, we're not going to fight it. We're not going to have these programs. And I think the administration knew that. I think they knew that if they threatened enough, if they threatened to sue, they didn't even have to sue. All they had to do was threaten to sue. And a lot of these institutions would cave in. And that is, in fact, what many of them have done. And then the question is, after Trump is gone, once this moment passes, if it passes, hopefully when it passes, will they decide to reinstitute them? I sort of doubt it, sadly, and they certainly won't without pressure.
Without pressure, exactly. That's the key. Real quick, just got to get your response to the fact that I was watching him speak a couple days ago. Yesterday, I think he was savaging Democrats, talking about Democrats are terrible people and all that. Yeah. And then he has this throwaway that it's just like a space filler, but it always gets a big applause. And he says, they want transgender for everyone. And I want to unpack that phrase with you. What does it mean that I or someone wants transgender for everyone? Like I don't want transgender for everyone. I actually don't want anything. Whatever you want is what I want.
I only want transgender for transgender people. That's sort of
not
thing.
For everyone.
I mean, I think it's just for transgender people. I think that's the whole.
I was reading. I thought you had the opinion of transgender for everyone.
I wish I had a joke here. Jesus, why did I not write material for this?
There's nothing. There is no joke. It's like a statement of.
It doesn't make any sense. It does, like so many things. There is no, and it's interesting to even try to unpack what is that phrase doing, right? What is that phrase doing?
I think it means you're going to force people to transition.
I think that's it. I think that the fear, right, is that everyone is going to be forced to transition. Everyone is going to be forced to undergo surgery. Everyone is going to be forced on someone else's hormones. I mean, it's an amazing degree of paranoia and victimhood, which does bring me to a point that is worth making, which is that the entire range of right-wing reactionary thought is about that.
Yeah.
It is about paranoid victimhood. It is about just bathing in victimhood. It is about believing in oneself as constantly put upon, aggrieved victim of someone else's conspiratorial scheme. And what's interesting, as we always say, every accusation is a confession, right?
Yeah.
So the accusations of pedophilia are really about them. That's why we see one after another MAGA pastor, youth pastor, Duggar child being the ones who were engaged in child sexual abuse. It's why they accuse, us of being the voter fraud people when it's really those old white folks in the villages. It's, again, every accusation is a confession. And I think when you say they want transgender for everyone, what's the accusation? They're going to make us be them, but really they want straight cisgender for everyone. They want everybody to be like them. They want, when they say we're going to have Sharia law, no, you want Christian nationalist law. You want biblical law according to the 10 Commandments. You want some kind of Handmaid's Tale kind of law. Doug Wilson wants Old Testament biblical law, and that's the church that Pete Hegseth is part of. That's the denominational school of thought that he comes out of. So the transgender for all thing is just another example of psychological projection, assuming that they want to do to us what we most definitely are wanting to do to them, which is force them to conform to our norm. And that's how the right has always tried to make their aggressions against other people's human rights seem like self-defense, right? Exactly. And that's what they do. Everything that they do, they couch in self-defense. So yes, these roundups of immigrants may seem harsh and brutal, but we're just defending ourselves against invasion. And if we don't do it, they're going to harm us. This is exactly, of course, what Hitler said about everything he did to Jews. Right. So when Hitler comes to power, the Enabling Act and whatever the act in 1933 that gives him absolute authority. I can't remember the name. I want to say it was the Enabling Act, but that's not the term. When he comes to absolute power, his argument is a lot of the things he starts saying about Jews. He says, well, they've called for a boycott of our country because I think the World Zionist Congress or whatever said, we should boycott Germany because Hitler is in power. And he said what he's going to do to Jews. And we as Jews think that, we should probably not buy shit from Germany. That seems fair. And his reaction was, in self-defense against the Jews, we must, persecute them, strip them of citizenship, destroy them economically, and then eventually, kill them. And he framed that as self-defense. They can always find a way to frame it as self-defense. Everything they do, even though it's actually an aggression against human rights, they can always find something. They can always say, well, we got to get you before you get us. That's what he's doing with trans folk. That's what he's doing with black folk. That's what he's doing with immigrants. That's what anti-Semites do with Jews. That's what everybody does on the right is, you're not the victim. I'm the victim. That's what they're saying.
And they're always, it's always crazy because the aggressor that they choose is almost always the victim or somehow has a lot less power, influence, control, or guns. I mean, it's just picking on trans people has always been such a weak thing to do. I mean, I always talked about this at our Board of Education meetings when I would go after my neighbors for what they were doing. What are you doing? You're picking on, what's it going to be next year? That the kids who are physically disabled, a kid in a wheelchair is somehow beating up the jocks. It's a bizarre population to attack and to create somehow this victimhood around. So very well said. I got to ask you about Christian nationalism. We are seeing it everywhere. They are everywhere in that administration. And of course, the scariest of all, in my opinion, is Pete Hegseth because he's a Secretary of Defense and he's saying, pray for our military, get down on one knee and say a prayer for our military in Jesus' name. You mentioned his pastor, another guy who's in his church, very influential guy on Hegseth, this week said he thinks that Jesus needs to, or that God needs to strike down, kill James Tallarico. These guys with their medieval Bible beliefs are terrified of Tallarico because he's an effective progressive Christian, and he is very well liked, and his message is getting across. And all they have, as Tallarico always says, is a mouthful of scripture and a heart full of hate. What do you make of where they are at now, Pete Hegseth, the influences, and the calling of God to strike him down, strike down Tallarico?
And it's just amazing to me that the media is so supine that they will not, to his face, call out Pete Hegseth and challenge him specifically on the kinds of things that his specific pastor here in Tennessee, but also that Doug Wilson, the sort of spiritual founder of that line of thought in this country, the kinds of things that they say. Doug Wilson has said, and he brought Doug Wilson to the Pentagon, to pray at the Pentagon.
Yeah, I covered it and brought a guest to talk just about it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Wilson, has said women should not vote, should have no leadership roles at all. He has said slavery was not that bad, that the slaves in the South were treated very well. So I want the media to challenge him directly on that, because we need to set up a confrontation between these two versions of Christianity. For too long, the right has been allowed to say any criticism of that kind of Christianity is an attack on Christianity itself, that it's an attack on Christians, that it's anti-Christian bias. But those who are progressive Christians, James Tallarico being one of them, Reverend Barber over in North Carolina being another, Jim Wallace, others who are obviously at the forefront of a much different kind of Christianity, are good examples of a very different way of living that particular faith. Now, I don't happen to be a Christian. I don't have skin in the game with that particular argument, but I know that this country does, because there are different Christian traditions. There's the Christianity of Dr. King, and there's the Christianity of Doug Wilson. And they are not the same.
No, they are not.
And it is time for those who believe in the Christianity of Dr. King to step up and to challenge Pete Hegseth on his version of the Bible. And I want to see what happens when somebody does it, because Pete Hegseth is already trying to out Colin Jost in terms of his impersonation of Pete Hegseth. I want to see Pete Hegseth challenged on his particular version of Christianity, and I want him to be asked where in Scripture Jesus calls for his enemies to be killed by God. I want to know where that, because Doug Wilson's Bible is not New Testament. It is not the Christian Scripture. It's not the Gospels. There's no Gospels in anything Doug Wilson actually says. And it's interesting. Like, if you watch Handmaid's Tale, right? Handmaid's Tale is a very interesting story, because you do not hear Jesus talked about in Handmaid's Tale. The folks that set up Gilead in that story are all Old Testament folks, man. They are all like, hardcore death, fire and brimstone, early God stuff like that. There's no redemption. There's no Jesus talk at all. That's the kind of God that the Christian nationalists actually believe in. Right. And I want someone to bring that to the attention of the country, because we conflate Christianity with the right, when in fact the kind of Christianity that those folks believe in is increasingly far removed from the Christianity that I think most American Christians grew up with. And certainly most American Christians, like over the age of 40, I would say. Oh,
no, this is new. This is definitely new. It's been well documented, the rise of it by a whole bunch of authors that you and I both know, from Kristen Dumez to Robbie Jones to Jamar Tisby to more and more. Ibram X. Kendi has a new book out. I got to just ask you just about, by the way, one of the reasons why Hegseth hasn't been asked is because he kicked all the reporters out. Like, I'm not even sure that a reporter has had access to him, but the Supreme Court just said, well, you got to let him back in. Or a federal court did, I think. And so now, hopefully he will get asked that question. Also, he should be hauled up in front of a Senate hearing, obviously, and he should be asked that question by any number of senators about his fucking wacky, horribly dangerous, terrible rapture beliefs at a time where we're in this war, which is the final thing I want to ask you about. I don't know what the question is, but did you have war with Iran on your prediction list for Trump Part 2?
No, I didn't. And not because I ever bought the idea that he was anti-war. I never, the idea that Glenn Greenwald apparently believed, which was that Donald Trump was going to keep us out of forever wars. And some of the MAGA left, because Glenn Greenwald would still say he's not a right winger, whatever. They believed it, but I didn't. I certainly knew he was willing to wage war. He likes the idea of breaking things. He likes the idea of pretending that he's a soldier. He likes the idea of having the power to kill and using that power. But I really didn't think this would be the move. The Venezuela thing didn't shock me at all. What I did not anticipate, though, was that on the heels of the kidnapping of Maduro, that he would get such a high from that, that he would then say, oh, shit, let's do this one. And that, of course, Netanyahu is salivating at the thought of enlisting the United States to help in that endeavor, which he has wanted to do for a very long time. And so all of the stars sort of aligned in Netanyahu's mind and in Trump's mind for that operation to be pulled off. Although I would say I don't know that it is being pulled off. The fact that we're not seeing nightly evidence, the fact that they're having to stitch together videos, Pete, of a handful of live action and then SpongeBob and video games. And they keep saying, oh, we're doing it because it gets lots of engagement. The young men love this. It's exciting. And but you know what? It's also a little weird, isn't it? That you and I remember, your listeners remember, during the Iraq War, we were seeing nonstop bombs over Baghdad. We were seeing nonstop footage, right, of things being attacked. We had constant footage, and we have not had that. And the only reason I can imagine that we are not seeing that same kind of footage is because we aren't having nearly the success that is being claimed in this instance. He would have us believe, Trump would have us believe we've decimated them. We've destroyed their country. We've destroyed their military. We've destroyed their capital city. They don't want to show us Tehran because that probably is not true. And what little bit of information is coming out of international sources would suggest it isn't true. They are still bombing. They are still sending missiles into Israel. They are still bombing other countries in the region. I don't believe for 1 second that the success that is being claimed is real. But what's happening is Donald Trump is being fed all of this happy talk by his sycophantic cabinet members and the people around him because he cannot hear negative news. They're all afraid. If you're willing, Marco Rubio, to wear shoes that are 3 sizes too large to please your boss, you are going to tell him any damn thing that you think he wants to hear. Oh, yeah. That's what's so dangerous in this moment.
Did you see that? Mike Johnson, Mike Johnson gave him, they had a GOP fundraiser for Republicans, and they gave him an award.
An America First award.
They gave him a Golden America First award.
Yeah. The first inaugural, of course, just like the soccer award, the
FIFA Peace Award. Yeah.
I mean, it's just how many participation trophies does one 79-year-old man need to feel complete? The hole in his heart and the hole in his soul. Meanwhile, his wife is walking out at the White House with a robot that she would far prefer to have in the bed with her than her husband. Everything's just going to shit for him. And the only thing he's got is the ability to drop bombs and kill people. And it's pathetic and sad and dangerous and destructive. And it's time for it to stop, and it's time for Grandpa to
before he sends in the 82nd Airborne.
Right.
I mean, if they send guys in and they start getting slaughtered.
Yeah. And that's what's going to happen. This is a guy who doesn't understand. I think Donald Trump looks at Iran just like he looks at any country, I think, that is not Western. First of all, he doesn't realize how Western Iran really historically
he doesn't realize anything. Yeah.
And actually still is. I mean, even under the mullahs, it's not as quote unquote backwards as he'd like to perceive. It's not Afghanistan under the Taliban. You know what I mean? And it never was. But he looks at any country that's run by brown people for sure, and any country that's Muslim, and he just sort of assumes that, just like he looks at every country in Africa. He thinks everybody in Africa lives in a hut. He's essentially said that. I think he actually did say that at one point. Yeah. That's why he didn't want people coming here, because they all have AIDS and they live in huts and they'll never want to leave, I think was the quote. He looks at Iran and he just figures like, well, they're not going to be – when he said we didn't think they were going to retaliate, what he's really saying is we didn't think they could. We just figured they had slingshots.
He was told they could. He was told they could. He doesn't listen. Everybody told him what would happen. His people told him what would happen. Like from Tulsi Gabbard to his chief of staff, they laid out with the things that could and likely would happen. They gave him percentages. They showed him videos. He just wasn't listening. He dozed off. He doesn't care. Right. He knows best. He's in charge. He's an absolute madman and a psycho. And I can't believe that we're here in a war, and gas prices, the ripple effect across the planet, is Europe and Asia is like, what the my buddy in Australia is like, they're talking about having to ration energy. Like the rest of the world must be like, I can't believe that we're now being directly affected by this guy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really sort of and all the things that he bragged about in his first term, he now says doesn't matter. Not only that black unemployment thing, but like the gas prices, the stock market. Stock market took the biggest dive in years today, right? And he used to brag about that. What did he say? He said, your 401 is doing – he would make up the stories about the guys that would come up to him and say, sir, my 401 is doing so.
Stories all the time. I can't believe we're still analyzing him. I can't believe it. It is just weird that he's the only guy I know at all or have heard of that is constantly making up conversations with people. I talked to one of the ex-presidents told me he wished he had gone to Iran. Who was it? It was one of them. They're all like, I didn't talk to him.
They all say it didn't happen. Right. They all say it didn't happen.
He didn't call me.
Yeah. Right.
All right, Tim.
Didn't happen.
So great talking to you as always. Really appreciate you joining me. Everybody go support the African American Policy Forum. Kimberly Crenshaw has a new book, right?
She does. Backtalker. It'll be out on the 5th of May, which is also her birthday. So as a birthday gift, you should go and get it. You should pre-order it.
Yeah.
It's her memoir.
It's her memoir. Yeah. I'm going to talk to, hopefully I'm going to get to talk to her and touch with her people. So, and I know you can put in a good word for me, but I really appreciate you joining me today, and transgender for everybody. And thank you very much.
Yes, of course. All right, man.
Talk to you soon, buddy.
Take care. You bet. See you.
See ya. There he goes. Tim Wise. Go follow him on Twitter and Blue Sky. Support the African American Policy Institute and get all of his books and read all of his writings. So great. As always, love it. Go down a rabbit hole. Just put his name in YouTube and watch his speeches. They're so good. They go viral every time. As do his appearances here on Stand Up. Always grateful to have him. And even more you. Thank you. Especially Bumblebees listening all the way to the end. You are the specialist in my life. I really appreciate you supporting my work for as long as you do, and throughout the whole episode of the podcast. You made it all the way to the end. Congratulations to you. I've got an award for you. It's a golden coin. We have Trump's face on it. Okay, I got nothing but the end of the show, and I hope to see you live later when I'm going to be joined by Mara Quint. We'll talk about this weekend's protests and have some fun, and might bring on someone else because I'm going to be probably working a lot today around the computer. Follow me on the Threads and the Blue Sky and the Substack for my moment-to-moment feedback posts, pith, whatever. Support John Carroll, johncarroll.org right now, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Off of your fence, even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense, and you stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town, just stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down, oh, you better stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all win. They knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside. And listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand